Prologue. The rustling of branches outside the window and the distant cry of a night bird kept Ethan awake. He was looking at an old letter he had received 2 days ago. On the yellowed paper, he could see strange symbols, waves, a barely outlined sun or moon, and a thin sword above them. And inside was a single sentence: "Come to the Silver Lake, your destiny awaits you there." Ethan had never heard of this lake, but he felt a powerful call, and that's what kept him going. Chapter 1. The Road to the Unknown. At dawn, he left his apartment, threw a small backpack into the trunk of his car, and set off in search. The road seemed endless, a narrow asphalt road winding between fields, forests, and small villages where time seemed to have stopped. In the evening, on the outskirts of a remote village, a sign saying Silver Lake 2 kilometers led him to a broken dirt path. The car growled loudly as the wheels began to slip in the mud, but Ethan continued to move forward with confidence. Chapter 2. The first encounter with the lake. Tired and exhausted, he stopped the car near a small wooden house with a sign that read Fisherman's House. An elderly man with thick gray eyebrows and deep wrinkles on his face met him at the door. "You need a room, I suppose?" he asked, looking at me with a sharp look. "I run the place." Ethan nodded and decided to spend the night first, and then go looking for the lake tomorrow. However, his curiosity got the better of him, and after a quick snack, he immediately asked, "Have you heard about the mysterious letter with the strange coat of arms?" "It led me here." Clint was quiet for a moment, his gaze more attentive. "Oh boy, I think you're not the first to receive such a letter. But I'm warning you, these waters are troubled." Ethan felt an invisible tremor growing inside him. This place seemed to be drawing him in. Chapter 3. A Legend in Stone. In the morning, the gray sky was clouded with light rain. Clint showed Ethan the way to an old chapel that stood at the edge of the forest. According to the fisherman, ancient inscriptions and symbols related to the history of the lake could be found there. When Ethan entered the dilapidated chapel, the first thing that caught his eye was a stone stele with worn Latin script and images. Next to it, under a thin layer of cobwebs, was the same coat of arms: waves, a moon disk, and an elegant sword. At the bottom was a carved inscription: "The silver surface will hide the truth." When the heart is afraid to look into the depths. Fascinated by the beauty and strange sadness of this place, Ethan felt an inexplicable longing waking up inside him. It was as if the ancient history of the night himself was screaming from the ground, begging for release. Chapter 4. The Village and the Gossip. After returning from the chapel, Ethan went to ask around. The village had a little more than a dozen houses. Everyone knew each other, but apparently they didn't see many newcomers. People spoke in whispers. "They say that once upon a time there lived an old gentleman who had a castle somewhere beyond the forest," said a local resident. "He had a beautiful daughter, but one day she disappeared without a trace on the lake. The gentleman went mad with grief." Another man with a pitchfork, Peter, added. "There's also a legend about a knight who saved his beloved from a monster that lived in the depths of the lake. But he never returned. That's why they say the curse fell on this water." The stories of the missing, the monsters, and the night intertwined in Ethan's mind. Which one was right? Chapter 5. The First Night Adventure. In the evening, when dusk enveloped the village, Ethan decided to see the lake with his own eyes. He took a lantern, put on a warm jacket, and set off along a path through the forest. For almost an hour he wandered in the twilight until he heard the lapping of water. The lake opened up suddenly, with reed-covered shores and a mirror-like surface in the middle, reflecting the faded moon. When Ethan held up the lantern, he saw the water shimmering with silver. Suddenly his heart pounded as if he sensed danger. A transparent figure flashed in the moon's reflection. It seemed that a silhouette in a knight's helmet appeared on the surface of the water, and then disappeared. Ethan almost fell into the water as he staggered backward. His body broke out in a cold sweat. When he recovered, he decided that tomorrow he would find the boat and swim out to the middle no matter what awaited him. Chapter 6. Dreams and Visions. That night Ethan had nightmares that he saw a disfigured monster with massive scaly legs pulling him down to the bottom. Shimmering underwater waters, ominous green lights in the darkness. And then, the former splendor of the palace, where a pale girl with a piercing gaze wanders. When he woke up at dawn, he couldn't come to his senses for a long time. His head was spinning with terrible images. Through the window he could hear roosters singing and a light splash of water, as if the lake was calling him back. Chapter 7. Zach the Fisherman and the Warning. Ethan found another fisherman in the village, Zach, an elderly man with kind eyes and a slightly hunched back. he agreed to rent his boat. Why do you need to go to the lake at this time of year, boy? Zack sighed. No one who has searched for treasures and legends there has ever returned happy. Despite the warnings, Ethan was adamant that it was as if something was driving him forward. In addition, a strange attraction to this story was born in the depths of his soul as if it were part of his own destiny. Chapter 8. The treasured book. Before leaving for the lake, Ethan stopped by the village's only library, which turned out to be more of a private collection. Here, among the old tomes and yellowed newspapers, he came across a real treasure. A large book with engravings describing mythical creatures and ancient curses. On the pages was a drawing that looked remarkably similar to the coat of arms in the letter. Next to it was a castle tower and a lord in medieval clothes holding a young girl on his lap. The text below the illustration told of the majestic love of a knight and a noble lady, and the betrayal of the dark forces that sought to take possession of the castle. The ending depicts the knight's sacrificial death, which saved the maiden but also chained his soul to the Silver Lake. Only those who have a sincere heart and are not afraid of the depths of the other world can give peace to the soul of a knight and bring light back to those who are lost. Ethan felt his heart clench that he suddenly realized that he had been called here for a reason. Chapter 9. A desperate journey on the lake. The next night, when the moon rose high in the sky again, Ethan took a lantern and a book and set sail in a small fishing boat. The water was calm, but that only made him feel more anxious. In the middle of the lake, he noticed that the surface began to wobble slightly. Suddenly, a translucent silhouette of a knight rose right out of the water. His face was hidden by a helmet, but it was filled with sadness and indescribable pain. I'm here, Ethan whispered, feeling his voice tremble. If you can hear me, I want to know the truth. The spirit was silent for a moment, and then a whisper rumbled in the darkness as if from the lake itself. Help, release, curse, and then it was quiet. Ethan stood in the boat for a few more minutes, gasping for air and not knowing what to do next. Chapter 10. A mysterious underwater cave. In the morning, Emily, a local girl who helped out on the farm, told Ethan that there was an abandoned path on the opposite side of the lake that led to a rocky gorge. It was rumored that there was an underwater cave that could connect to the deeper part of the lake. This mention awakened a new idea in Ethan. Perhaps in that cave is hidden something that connects the knight to this world, his ancient sword or other artifact. So in the evening, he and Emily, armed with lanterns and thick ropes, set off in a boat to the rocks. The cave was not very deep, a narrow passage half flooded with water. Gradually they moved forward, lighting the way with lanterns until they found themselves in a small hall. The walls were covered with intricate bas-reliefs, knightly armor, coats of arms, symbols with swords and waves. In the corner, in the muddy water, a piece of metal was dangling, looking like a handle. Looking closely, Ethan felt his heart pounding. It was a sword, broken in half. Chapter 11. The curse comes to life. As they touched the broken sword, something in the cave suddenly shook. The water at their feet boiled, the rocks began to crack loudly, and rocks fell from the walls. Emily screamed, and Ethan held her close to him to protect her from the debris. Strange sounds came from the darkness, like the moans of hundreds of drowned souls. And suddenly the silhouette of the knight appeared in the air again. Now he looked not only sad but also confused. As if the curse was about to swallow him up forever. Bind, connect, a voice said, barely audible. Ethan noticed that the other half of the blade was sticking out of a crevice on the opposite side of the cave. He quickly moved there, trying not to fall into the water, and grabbed the rusty metal, which glowed with a strange bluish glow. When he joined the two parts of the sword, he felt a wave of freezing cold pass through his body. In a moment, the sword seemed to come to life, shining with a faint silvery light. Chapter 12. The choice of the heart. Suddenly, the water in the cave roared with wild fury. A strange creature with large, moist eyes and shiny scales was trying to come out. Perhaps the monster of legend that had once devoured the knight himself. It lunged, roaring, like a mix of snake, lizard, and fish. Emily screamed when the monster tried to grab her with a clawed paw. Ethan pulled himself together, feeling that he was holding a sword in his hand, as if telling him what to do. In one decisive movement, he swung and swept the blade in the air. The sword glowed with a bright light, and the creature shrieked and disappeared back into the darkness of the underwater depths. The cave calmed down, and the moaning stopped. At the same moment, the ghost of the knight materialized very close to me. Now he was no longer hiding his face. It was the noble and at the same time exhausted face of a young man who gave his life for his beloved. "Thank you," he said quietly, "you have saved me." The last words of the knight dissolved in the joyful gleam of the sword. The spirit's body was enveloped in radiance, and he dissolved like fog in the sunlight. Chapter 13. Cleansing the lake. When Ethan and Emily left the cave, the sun was already rising over the lake. They noticed that the water no longer looked muddy and threatening, but instead was surprisingly clear. It reflected the morning rays as if it were actually filled with liquid silver. When they returned to the boat, they felt relieved. The lake seemed to have lost its old dark energy. It was incredible to feel this lightness again. The birds began to sing, the breeze gently swayed the reeds. Chapter 14. The treasure on the shore. As soon as they reached the shore, Zack ran up to them with a frightened look on his face. He hadn't been able to close his eyes all night, wondering what had happened to the boy and girl. "What did you see?" he asked, panting. Emily and Ethan told him everything that had happened. Zack looked at them with his mouth open until Emily spoke. "There's no more of that monster in the cave. Maybe the curse has receded." Suddenly Ethan noticed something glistening near the shore where the wave had hit a rock. He leaned down and saw a small box decorated with silver overlays. Inside were ancient coins and a ring with an engraved coat of arms. "It seems to have belonged to that knight or the lord of the castle," he whispered. "Perhaps now the treasure has returned to freedom, just like the knight's soul." Chapter 15. A new beginning. What happened turned Ethan's life around, and he felt he had accomplished an important mission. Silver Lake, which had frightened people for centuries, was now a friendly, silent witness to the healing of an old wound. The villagers gradually learned that Ethan had overcome the water monster and freed the knight's soul. Some were still suspicious, saying that miracles had happened here before. But the water in the lake was now clean, the fish did not die for no reason, and the nighttime screams stopped. Clint, the old fisherman, shook Ethan's hand firmly as he said goodbye. "Here you not only cleaned the lake, but also freed us from fear." "Thank you very much." Ethan smiled, feeling his heart overflow with warmth and joy. Epilogue. Leaving the village, he looked back once more. The lake shone under the rays of the morning sun. Now it seemed not even silver but golden, its light was so warm and harmonious. In the quiet, lapping surface, Ethan saw the silhouette of a knight raising his hand in a gesture of gratitude and farewell. In a moment, everything disappeared and only a light breeze ran through the waves. Ethan was sure that the story of Silver Lake would now have a new life, without monsters, curses, and pain. He left with the idea that his adventures here were not over yet. After all, there may still be other secrets at the bottom of the lake, in the rocky gorge, in the old castle, just waiting for someone to find the courage to discover them.